I encourage my editors. I'm like, go out, guys. Please. I'm like, if you need to log in at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., great. Go to that party. I want people to be meeting people.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Side Projects podcast. We help marketers understand what cultural relevance actually means and requires from the people shaping media, art, and tech. Clara.
Trey.
How are you today?
I mean, kind of crazy for it just to be us two.
Right.
I feel like the inmates are running the asylum today with our
Good day to talk about men.
I know,
right?
exactly.
The
manosphere.
So our guest on the pod today is Lauren McCarthy, the editor-in-chief of NYLON magazine and the recently relaunched NYLON Guys magazine, which came back after quite a long hiatus.
Yeah, since
they
2017.
Stopped, in 2017 with the Stranger Things cast being their last cover.
Throwback.
And their newest cover, digital cover, features Somber, a.k.a. Shane Michael Boos. Pinky up. And basically their whole new remit is they brought back NYLON Guys basically to give a place for these it guys that were having a moment in culture and music. They just did a feature on Zayn Malik, who's got a new album coming out. But it kind of dovetails with this conversation that we've been tracking about, and this is my personal theory, but I think there's kind of an American psychoization of culture happening. I think, across the landscape, you have the kind of looks-maxing clavicular types who are bone-smashing their way to relevance and peptide stacking. I'm seeing all these crazy, conversations about how to, basically look better and drug your way to the top, essentially. But that, I think in the past few years, there's been sort of this vacuum of content that was directed towards straight men specifically. And therefore the sort of, hole that was left by Andrew Tate, God forbid, was sort of filled with this new era of, content that is very incel driven, and I'm wondering if you've kind of noticed this as well.
I couldn't help but notice.
Yeah.
Clavicular. But I mean, I do think you're right that the landscape of masculinity right now feels very fractious, perhaps. And so it was interesting, I think, to us to hear that NYLON was relaunching NYLON Guys and to hear where they're coming from, because I think that yes, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the manosphere that is very controversial, is very specific and niche, and is in some ways defining, I would say, the conversation around what it means to be a man right now. But I think there still is, or I think what NYLON is sort of betting that there is sort of an appetite for a guy-centric content vertical that is maybe some of the more normal stuff that guys are still looking for recommendations on.
Please be normal men.
Please be normal men. And
the normal
it's
challenge.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm curious to see how it goes for them long term, because I feel like there's also so many recommendation sort of new media publications, if you can call Perfectly Imperfect and things like that publications. But I think, to your point, I think they're sort of trying to lean away from that conversation. I just wonder, long term, how much that does just end up bleeding into everything.
Right. Well, because
male.
I think what was interesting is when Will Welch left GQ and was replaced by Adam, they literally said that they wanted to restore GQ to its rightful place as the North Star of masculinity. And I think, for better or worse, you can really argue that GQ's had some amazing coverage in the past, 10 years or so. But it has been kind of leading or driving towards this very capitalistic view of what a man is. And by that, I kind of mean how are you optimizing your life? And it's verging on parody now, which is why I mentioned American Psycho, where it's I have the, safety razor, blah, blah, and I use this whatever light mask, and it's kind of Blackbird spy plane, my all my denim is selvage Japanese, this kind of thing that I think, because of it's coinciding with the rise of maybe men feeling more comfortable posting about their lifestyles on social media, and they're kind of being perhaps less of a guide for how to quote unquote be a man. There's sort of just no one to really look to who's kind of doing it in maybe a healthy way. So you
Mm-hmm.
do have the rise of these claviculars, or I don't even know who else is like adjacent to that because I'm not in that world per se. But like,
Yeah.
I think when you have, you know, the publications telling you like buy this, shop that, do this kind of thing, and that is like coinciding with these guys who are physically mogging and dominating like, you know, the conversations online, there is so much pressure to, for a guy, I think, like buy into that kind of lifestyle. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see like what NYLON Guys offers in this kind of bleak landscape where I think it's like, again, more talent focused, more conversations around like just being cool and,
Yeah.
you know, living a kind of interesting life
And like
versus
fun and nightlife.
and fun and going out
Yeah.
and like, what do you drink? What kind of music do you listen to? So I do think there's like, it's a bright spot on a maybe dark map of
I know. It
Crazy.
can be seen from space.
yeah, no, it's interesting. But yeah, let's bring her on. Please welcome Lauren. Lauren McCarthy, welcome to Side Projects.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. So you just got back from Coachella. You are, you know, editor-in-chief of NYLON, which you've been for about 6-ish years.
Yeah.
And now recently relaunched NYLON Guys.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
So I first want to start actually at Coachella because a lot happened this past weekend. NYLON House has been there also for like centuries now.
It feels like centuries. I think we're on 5 or 6.
Oh, cool.
But again, feels like centuries in a fun way.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, NYLON House being at Coachella, you do like NYLON nights and a lot of very like nightlife focused events, more so than I would say any other publication. You have, you know, the franchise Night Out With, which I believe was part of your era.
Yes.
Right? That you brought to, to the table. So I'm curious why the focus on like nightlife. Do you think there's something still kind of happening in these more subcultural spaces that has not been fully tapped into? Like, what is NYLON looking for there?
So for me, a lot of this comes from like my personal interests. So when I came up, I started at Women's Wear Daily as an assistant, but as part of like assistant duties and like perks, I could go and I'm sure like for everyone else that worked there, they're like, we're giving her like the bad work, but I would get to go to cover parties. And I just loved like, it's a room, you know, it's a privilege to be in a lot of these rooms. It's also just like very strange sometimes to be in these rooms. And I just found, you know, watching those situations, I became obsessed with kind of just like, I think some of the best reporting can come just from people watching. And at parties is the best people watching. And so, you know, when I started at NYLON 7 years ago, NYLON really is like a music and it's a fashion based magazine, and I have a primarily fashion background. I was at Women's Wear, and then I was at Harper's Bazaar, and then I was at W. And when I was at W, I started doing more in the culture space because music is like something I really love. And when I think about like music and fashion in kind of a way to break through the noise, one thing that's a perk of, you know, being a journalist and working at these types of magazines is you get in these rooms that you otherwise wouldn't be in. And for me, NYLON is really we're like for our readers and we don't want to like ostracize them. So for me, that means like I'm in these rooms, I want to tell you what I saw. And I just think parties are kind of like where you get the best of all those worlds. And especially when you think about music, for me, that's a lot of like, I think of live music and like the energy that comes with it. So that kind of like really helps us have this kind of view of like how we're covering these certain lenses. And I just think, you know, this nightlife culture it's still vibrant and it's something that people are interested in, whether you're there or you're not there. I think like, you know, coming out of Coachella, everyone's like, who'd you see at the parties? It's not even like who, you know, like how was Bieber? It was like, who came to NYLON House?
Right.
And like what happened inside and like how were the Cat's Eye girls?
Yeah, literally. How are they?
They were lovely.
No, I thought it was funny too. Like I think Zoran Mamdani for his like 100 days in office did something at Basement or something.
Totally.
And I'm like, okay, nightlife is alive and well. Like you have something going on here.
100%. And I also think nightlife there's so many aspects to it, you know? It's, for me, nightlife now is like maybe like having a martini and like hang out with my friends. But then, you know, for other people on my staff, it's, you know, going to basement. And for other people, it's going to some underground show at, like, you know, the Greenpoint Law or whatever. So I just love that they're even in like this NYLON world where I feel like everyone on my staff is very much ingrained and like represents like who NYLON is and who it's for. There's different aspects of nightlife within that like tiny even subculture.
Right. And even when you're talking to these talent, it's like what you do night out, like, you know, what you're kind of like seeing and witnessing as you're out with them is so fascinating.
Totally. And I always think it through a NYLON lens when I think about who we want to be our next it girl, who we want to be our cover star. Like, yes, you want them to be a certain level of fame. Yes, like an Instagram following and like having like that all matters. Yes. But at the end of the day, I also want it to be someone you kind of just want to like hang out with at the end of the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like who the NYLON girl, who the NYLON guy, who the NYLON reader is it's someone like you kind of want to be like, I want to hang out with that person.
Yeah.
And so a night out with kind of came from that where I'm like, wait, we actually have the ability to hang out with these people. So let's do it and then let people know what it is like to hang out with them.
Right.
Well, maybe that's a good segue into talking a little more about NYLON guys.
Yeah.
Because I think one thing that we were talking about is like just understanding both like who the audience is of NYLON guys and then also what the filter is for like the type of content you guys are looking to do. Just like there is some sort of guy-centric content out there in the editorial world. Like GQ obviously has done a really good job for the past few years. So like is this space you're carving out like around nightlife for guys or like what's your POV kind of?
Yeah, totally. So
brand?
I think it stems from this, you know, when I stepping back and looking at NYLON, especially since I've been editor-in-chief for about 3 years now, it's for me, it all circles around this idea of like an it girl, you know, and that really is NYLON's bread and butter. Like, I really feel like they're some of the first to like coin the term, and this is like the OG NYLON, who I grew up on and loved and like revere beyond. And it is, again, going back to like these cool girls that you just kind of want to hang out with. Again, like our it girl issue this year was Devin Lee Carlson. She's not a traditional celebrity, but she's someone who has crazy engagement and is someone you just want to watch and you want to hang out with. And so I really do kind of view us like circling this like it girl ecosystem in the past, you know, 5-6 years. That's really what we've been focusing on. And I think we've really kind of nailed it now. And it when you think about who a NYLON cover star is, who a NYLON it girl is, it is kind of like that cool girl. And everything we cover kind of circles around that in terms of, you know, in terms of nightlife. Where are they going? What's the cool cocktail that they're drinking? The brands, what are they wearing? Where are they shopping? And so I feel like we've really got that universe. But over the past like year or two ago, especially when we're talking about cover stars, a lot of guys come up, you know, all of a sudden. And I feel like you see, going back to like Geese, like Cameron Winter is someone you want to know more about. And he's cool and he has his own style. Over like last summer, I feel like it was a huge explosion where you had Role Model, you had Somber, you have Joe Curie is like in this music space. There's these cool guys. And I was like, they need a moment to celebrate too. Like, we've really championed our it girls, but there's these kind of it guy substack that I think is a different world than say your GQ, who's going to put a Brad Pitt, a George Clooney, even a Travis Kelce on the cover.
Like established men.
100%. And as they should. And GQ is GQ for that reason. And they continue to be kind of like the men's magazine. We're not trying to do that. It is, again, these kind of like up and comers who are kind of, you know, again, in the music world a lot, which is where we view our people. We do, you know, actors and stuff as well. But they're in the mix, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's not just, they don't really live in a silo. You kind of, they're out and about. They have a really good sense of who they are. You kind of care beyond just listening to their songs. You want to know a bit more about them. And that's kind of the focus for us for NYLON guys, is who are these guys who are kind of like of the moment and kind of have popped up and you're like, where did they come from? And like, what's next for them? And in terms of our coverage, that again, it kind of circles around this. So for our first digital issue, it was, you know, going out to guys that we think are cool and where are you shopping? What are you buying right now? Talking with my staff and them bringing up how like a lot of guys are on their fragrance journey right now. And once someone brought that up, I was like, I do have a lot of guy friends who all of a sudden are really into fragrances. So it's talking to a very cool like perfume guru on where should people start. It's, you know, the substack of like, party rock music happening and kind of just like talking to two cool people. So I think what you'll see with NYLON versus a lot of other magazines is it's not so much of taking these big, what does it all mean and stuff like that. It's more just championing things that we think are like really happening in this moment, talking to people that we think are authorities and that we as authorities in terms of journalists have kind of appointed as like, we care about what you have to say, so please tell us that, and then we'll project that out.
Well, I think it's so interesting from like a talent standpoint too, and like we are, magazine lovers here, as you can tell from our from our decor. But I think what's interesting is sort of seeing how different magazines are sort of defining what the value they bring to both talent and then also to an audience. Because I think something that we experience working with talent from like a brand side is like they have such direct access to their audience already, and their audience knows so much about them. Yeah. So then like when you go to part or be interviewed by a magazine, like what is the magazine able to bring to the table that like this artist wouldn't necessarily be able to do alone? Yeah. And so I wonder like how you guys are thinking about like in approaching talent, like what is the value that NYLON is bringing from like an audience side? Is it sort of like giving this unfiltered access, but like in a way that you wouldn't get from like watching Somber, like Trey was saying, like make a pina colada on his TikTok.
Have you seen those TikToks?
This guy on TikTok. Listen, I love him.
He's amazing. Yeah,
literally, Your Honor, I love him. He is actually quite lovely, and was like, and again, Somber for me. So for Somber, obviously last year's summer was like kind of he was popping off and everything, and he was definitely on my radar. I was like, who's this like 9-foot tall person that's wearing Valentino all of a sudden, but
with no shirt,
and I was like, great, fab. But I went to his show at Brooklyn Steel in maybe like October or so, and this was when we were really starting to be like, okay, let's start getting the wheels on this first issue. And he had like a great commandment of the crowd in a way that I was like, you just started. And a way of connecting with them that I thought was really interesting. And again, I was kind of intrigued of what is he like off stage, and does this kind of continue on in his personal life and how he carries himself there. And so when you talk about what can we bring as a cover story, it is, again, and I'm not to repeat myself, but it's kind of this of like, let's get to the real you version of it. And so what I say with our cover stories is, sometimes we have publicists, being like, don't ask about XYZ, and I think every magazine deals with that. But for us, my line is always like, we're not TMZ, we're not People magazine, we're never trying to like get you with a celebrity. It's really kind of being able to hang out with them, and it kind of puts it on them. It's obviously we have our questions, we know what we want to know and get out of them, but it's really on like, we hung out with this person and this is what they're like. And the same goes for our pictures. Is I don't think you're ever going to see us like in a like, again, we're not going to have like Law Roach styling Travis Kelce on a jet ski. Amazing, great images. But for us, I always say for our celebs, it's a bit like we want to make you look like you but a little bit cooler. Or like you're gonna be like in a cool pair of jeans, but they're gonna be like Alexander McQueen. And it's so for Somber, it's again like shirtless, like like in a Valentino, open up was our cover image, and that's basically what he wore to Coachella. So it's kind of just like a bit more of a polished version of themselves. So I think for NYLON, you get to come to NYLON and walk away still feeling like it was a representation of yourself. And I think it's amazing that other magazines do these like crazy, fantastical things and, conceptual stories. And I think you see a lot of, celebrities interviewing different celebrities, which I love to read those. But I think for NYLON, it's a bit more of like the human side of it all.
Right.
Yeah.
I think too, like, I wonder how you navigate this, because obviously well, not obviously to you maybe, but like I had a journalism background as well. When I interviewed Odessa Azion for The Face, the publicist was like, oh, she won't, talk about XYZ thing. Like, do not mention her famous family. Do not mention her sister. And the editor just agreed to it blanketly. And I was like, oh, so I have like nothing I can really ask. And for Somber, for example, like last year he had that whole kind of thing around, this girl that had gone to his concert, did just like a regular review on TikTok and was like, oh, there's all these like 14-year-old girls in the audience, and he's like very, sexually explicit on stage and like it was just uncomfortable and all this kind of stuff. And then he responded to that.
Yeah.
Like, is that something that you look to make room for in the story, or is it something that like, you know, it's just a politics thing, the publicist is not going to want that in the story, so you're like, that's not our bread and butter anyways? Like, how do you kind of go about doing that?
I think it's a case-by-case situation, which I think is like not a fun answer here. But it depends, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Sometimes it's like, when is a story coming out? Is it going to make sense to, you know, talk about certain situations if it happened years ago, and does it feel relevant to the situation? You know, what is the story about? And, you know, for like our music issue was a big Coachella moment, and especially for both Cat's Eye and Somber, of having this kind of like, both of them like having dreams of playing Coachella. So it's, you know, focusing on this kind of like moment of like it's kind of like anointing, like you've hit this next step. So I think it really is. And going back to kind of like our strategy in terms of just interviewing in general, I want all of our interviews to feel like conversations. So a lot of the times, you know, ideally we're matching the right writer with the right person, and things just come up because you'll feel comfortable in conversation. So that's, at least I think from a journalist's point of view, is you want to pair the right writer with the right person so it feels comfortable for both of them. And we have a great features director, Nolan Feeney, who really does take a lot of time into like thinking like it's a puzzle pieces of, you know, like who's going to be with what. Like we had Brittany Spanos, who had just left Rolling Stone to do Cat's Eye, which I was so thrilled about. And that felt like a great match for us. And so, yeah, I think it's a lot of like trusting that a conversation will go free, like it'll go through. And I think a lot of times once the publicist isn't in the room, you'll find that the artist wants to talk about what they want to talk about at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I guess zooming out just like landscape wise, I think like the last issue, and correct me, but the last issue of Nylon Guys was like 2017.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it was the Stranger Things.
Yes, exactly.
Boys.
Which, how funny that, like technically we could have done that again and it would have felt relevant.
Like, I know, it's sort of like a then and now type of thing, free idea. But I wonder, like, I feel like so much has changed, obviously, between 2017 and now. Like, there was no TikTok 2017. Right. It was
oh my god,
crazy.
Take me
Can you
back.
imagine? Like, no TikTok, like, no Reels. Like, this was pre-social video, I guess. And I think what's interesting to me is, like, I have seen, like, a lot of, like, sort of male-centric editorial start to begin. And I think that, like, looking at it from the outside, I get it on some level, but I'm also like, this is such an interesting moment to be talking about men and to be talking about masculinity. And I think like one of the things that feels clear to me is like there's no real consensus around what masculinity means. Like I feel like
for the guys too.
For the guys too. And like post-COVID, I feel like it was like Evan Mock in makeup commercials. And now it's kind of like the vibes have shifted.
Yeah.
And so I wonder like both kind of like a why now question just from like a general landscape piece, and then like also how are you thinking about that in terms of like how Nylon is defining masculinity and like who they're defining if they are, you know, like how are you sort of defining how you're approaching that?
I think, you know, for us, like going back, it's like I don't think we're ever going to do like a what is masculinity now type of thing. I just don't think that's our place or, you know, what we need to do. As I said, it's kind of, we're viewing Nylon Guys as an extension of Nylon proper, and it's not so much about like what we're covering. It's not, I think we were planning for Nylon Guys the same time we were planning for this music issue, and there were several stories that were like, which one should it go in? We did like a retrospective of it was just the 15-year anniversary of that LCD Sound System show that was supposed to be their final show at MSG, and that easily could have gone in Nylon Guys. So for us, and I think this goes for everything we do, is it's very talent. It's kind of like the center of it. So for Nylon Guys, it's more about who are we covering and focusing on versus these kind of like grander ideas. And so for now, it felt right for us because we felt like good about a lot of these talent that we could champion and feel good about featuring. And that goes from, you know, even someone like a Terrence O'Connor, who we featured in the issue, who's really, he's working with the girls, but you know, he's bringing his own style to a lot of it. And so for him, it's like, I care about like where you're shopping, like tell me things and what you're buying and things like that. So that's kind of like where the why now for nylon guys is it did feel like, and again, like to your point, we're finding a lot of these people on TikTok and Instagram, whereas in I think you look at the nylon guys from 2017, it's very traditional. It's who was on a Netflix show at the time.
Yeah.
And we definitely have room for that still, but a lot of these, going back to even, you know, having a Devin Lee Carlson on the cover of Nylon, does feel very true to Nylon, because they would have like a Corey Kennedy and you know, but I know, but so it's who are those new people? And you do find them on these unexpected channels now, where you'll find them on a TikTok and stuff like that, instead of being a street style, someone at a party shot a photo of you.
So I feel like I have this theory that there's like this kind of, like we're at peak American psychoization, which is like, I'm kind of joking about it, but also it's like guys, and this is a sweeping generalization, but I think are very much into not only looks maxing and that kind of side of things, like peptide stacking and, you know, posting content about body transformations, but on the other side of things, like where are they shopping? What kind of toothpaste are they using? What's their like 5-step routine? You know, and I think that like through that lens, even the things you are featuring, it's very talent led, but it's like, oh, what is Terrence O'Connor buying to look nicer? Or what kind of fragrance is Ethan Gaskell wearing? And I'm just curious if like your way into maybe this like broader conversation is very kind of talent led. And if you also notice this kind of like, I don't know if it's like just commercialization of masculine culture, but I do feel that men, like you said, are kind of more into fragrance. They're more into like health and wellness. They're more into looking good. And I'm just curious, like, what you've noticed in that realm.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it comes in, it's a cyclical thing, right? Because remember, I think it was, 10 years ago where all of a sudden it was very much like the beauty for men was a huge space and everything. And so now we're kind of back in this other space. And for us, I think it is, again, I don't think we're ever going to do these kind of like 5-step routine. It's not, I'm never going to be like, here's the 5 steps you need for XYZ. And it's more about, even our shopping things, I think, are a bit more like finding something like, what's the vintage store that you found out? And we want it to feel more kind of less broad. And I think more niche is just in general. I think that's in the Nylon DNA too, is finding these kind of like, what are the subcultures that are happening, and what can they tell us about what's going on right now, and I think it's more about these finding a little nugget of something that feels like unique and truthful in these things, and not these kind of just like feeding into these larger conversations, and more just feeling truthful to certain people. And I care more about like what do you think about this versus what does this say about the larger scheme of things.
So then where do you go to kind of find these guys? Like what is an it guy to you, and how do you
Great question. One thing I love is now I feel like I was always like this person going into like the edit meetings being like, and so I found this person, blah, blah, blah. And now my staff brings it up. I'm like, wait, what? I've never heard of this person.
Isn't it crazy?
It's crazy. It's
Aging
like
is wild.
one day you wake up and you're like, oh no. So yes, TikTok, all these things, you'll find them. But again, going back to the nightlife of it all, I encourage my editors. I'm like, go out, guys, please. I'm like, if you need to log in at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., great, go to that party. I want people to be meeting people. And, whether it's you sat next to them at a fashion show, or, you went to a dive bar and they were really cool. Like something we talked about for this issue that I think we'll save for another issue is one of my editors was like, yeah, I was talking to my barista and they're in this really cool band and I went to go see them and they're really awesome. So it's finding those people that, again, if they have like 200 followers on Instagram, that's fine, as long as they seem cool and in this realm. And what does that mean? It's it's hard. I say cool a lot and you're kind of like, what does that mean? For me,
break it down.
How much time do you have? But I think in the broad sense of it, it's someone who feels comfortable in their own skin and is doing things that feel truthful to them, and that could be as easy as like just the way they kind of like style their clothes. And if for them it's like not styling, it's they're pairing this with this and that's how it feels right for them that morning, but you can kind of look at it and be like, oh, you did something there that no one else is doing. So it's someone who has a bit of an original sense to them.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, like, because I think something that comes up is like sort of the cool hunting, for
Yes.
lack of a better word, from
Yeah.
like a brand standpoint. And I think like it's so true what you're saying around like needing to go places IRL, because I think what can happen a lot, and like not to knock TikTok as a place to discover things, but I think that there is sometimes kind of a focus on like, oh, we want to find someone for a campaign, so we're just gonna have everyone flood the phones, like pick up the phones, like find someone.
Right.
And I think increasingly, like kind of to your point, the people that are interesting are the people that are not as online.
100%.
Honestly, like I feel like the sort of influencer creator class that exists now is like they know what they're doing, and what they're doing is sort of like, not again to knock the hustle, but it's like a very commercial skewing thing. I think at this point you can like have essentially a business of being an influencer. And I wonder like how true do you find that in terms of like, not that like social media is totally washed, but that it's just not a place that's like fruitful for like discovery in that way.
Yeah, no.
Like,
I think especially when we're launching this first issue of NYLON Guys, there's kind of like, 5 or 6 like cool guy influencers that pop into mind. And my thing was kind of like, let's not do them.
yeah.
And I really like a lot of them.
Wait, why not though?
Because everyone else is doing them,
Okay.
and I think it's, you'll see other magazines when they need a male fashion expert, they'll go to X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's find W.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you on that point, where it can kind of be the lane of least resistance to kind of just be like, let me go on TikTok and scroll and who did the most recent J. Crew ad or whatever it is. And yeah, so finding people in the real world is the harder way to do it, but I think the better way to do it. And for us, finding it is the way I know we've like honed in on the right person or the right story or the right trend is I'll bring it up in a meeting, or someone else will bring it up in a meeting, and someone else will be like, oh my God, yeah, my friend was just talking about this. I like to start off my weekly edit meetings by being, what did you guys do this weekend? And that's when you'll find out like, oh, everyone was listening to this one song, or everyone went to this one party, and why are we all going to that party for some reason? So you do want people to actually be doing these things and interacting with these things and not just scrolling on their phone.
Yeah. Well, because I think it's like interesting, and I'm curious to learn more, I guess, like how you sort of like approach running those meetings, because I think that like it can kind of become, I don't know if it's like cart leading the horse that's the right metaphor, but it's kind of like, the client wants to do this kind of project, so let's kind of find someone that fits that mold, like I can see a world where it's like, oh, there's a cover and we know we want to kind of do something like this. Yeah. So let's like kind of put a person that looks like that there. Yeah. And it's like, I think that is something that I think that editorial companies do better, obviously, than brands, is like trying to find the talent and then letting the talent tell the story, where like I think a lot of the times with brands it can kind of be opposite, where there's like a story and the talent kind of becomes the mouthpiece. And I think sometimes they're getting better. But like I wonder what you think of that, or like when you look at the brand landscape, like kind of like we were talking about with Coachella, are there brands that you do think are telling interesting stories with talent, or that are like trying something new with talent, and like do you take any cues from that at all?
Yeah, in terms of brands, in terms of like other magazines, or in terms
of other magazines, or like consumer brands, or like mini brands, niche brands.
Yeah, I think what you always want, again, it goes back to our Coachella conversation, is it to feel truthful. And so I think, there'll be times where we'll be discussing someone for the cover and they'll have just done another cover, or we'll have heard that, they have like a summer cover coming out with X, Y, and Z, and we're able to be like, well, ours will look nothing like that. And I think we've worked really hard at NYLON to be able to look at a cover and say that's a NYLON cover. And I think that's the strongest thing a magazine can do right now, is to have their own identity. My friends over at ID, I think, are doing a great job right now. They brought it back most recently, and you can kind of tell what an ID cover is. And they have the branding of covering the one eye, and I think that's awesome. And then on the other end, maybe it's just because it's top of mind, I honestly think Hailey Bieber's doing a really good job of, the talent makes sense. Getting Sarah Pigeon right at the right time, and it made sense, and that I think that's a good example of it didn't feel just like, let me get the girl who's on the hot show right now. It was like, we'll put her in the cute blush because it actually does look good on her and it feels truthful. So I think brands that, to your point, doesn't feel like they're trying to be like hot celebrity, hot brand, let's mix them together. I think with Cat's Eye and Gap, you saw that.
Yeah.
And that was crazy.
Gap does a really interesting
Gap does a great job.
And I feel like they're also kind of in a music lane.
Totally.
These days.
Right.
Like, yeah,
yeah,
so much so.
They tapped Sienna Spyro really quickly, who we just did something with for the music issue. So I was like, oh man, we are really connected there. But I agree. I think they're doing a good job of, again, even with Cat's Eye was, was huge, popular, but they did a good job of meshing both worlds together, and I think that's when like a mark of a really successful. I think I just brought up JQ. I think J. Crew does a really fun job with who their talent is working with, whether it's someone like a Molly Gordon, who I love and is cool, and also you can see wearing Gap, and then having like Kareem do it as well, and those are like a mix of cool people that just feel like, oh yeah, they probably do shop at the Gap.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about Calvin Klein. Like, I'm in their broadcast channel on Instagram where those things are like real to people, but every day it seems they're posting like a new interesting talent wearing their Calvins, and it does feel authentic, where I'm not like offended by seeing it. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, they killed it with that Dakota Johnson.
Right. Yeah. And then when they do these bigger
the girls,
campaigns,
the gays, the guys, we all loved it.
We loved it. I want to talk a bit about this, what I'm deeming the new press cycle. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with, ID launching onto Substack to kind of reach audiences there. And just this morning, Lena Dunham, who's got her new Famesick book out, did a guest post for Shop Rat Substack, as among other things. Like, she did her big like New York Times David Marchese interview. But I'm kind of curious where NYLON and NYLON Guys fits into, I'm going to go on Past That Puss, Jake Shane, then I'm going to like, what for these celebrities are kind of planning out their press cycle. Where does NYLON and NYLON Guys kind of fit into that? And
I think when I think NYLON Guys and I think our It Girl franchise is a good. I view our like It Girl franchise particularly as part of this quote unquote press cycle, where for NYLON It Girls, it's kind of this crowning moment of it's not our cover stars, they're not opening the movies, but they're maybe like opening an indie movie, or they're on a hot TV show or something like that. So, and now having them come to us during this press cycle is like really exciting. And I think that's when they want to get in front of people. And I feel like NYLON's a place you can get in front of people. Going back to everything we said, is you don't necessarily need to stay so on topic to the movie. I don't think anyone needs to read another interview of like, loved working with my director, blah, blah, blah. Great. You go to Variety for that and you do that. You come to NYLON and do your It Girl feature so that it can be like, this is where, I love to go shopping or whatever the case may be. Or when I'm out with my friends, this is what I do. We do like a cute social video called NYLON It Girl Recommends, where it's, here's the bar I recommend, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's where we really view it. And in terms of our covers, I always say, in terms of the press cycle, the number of times we have booked someone to be our cover and then we end up shooting it in New York the same week they're on SNL.
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
serendipitous.
It's serendipitous, but I'm like, great. That means we're booking the right talent, because they're just, they're not here. They're right here, if this is the curve. So that's where I like to think of our cover stars and their press cycle. But then they're also probably going on Hot Ones that week. Like they're doing like the New York press cycle.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's really interesting though, because I feel like there's this just kind of new ecosystem of how to get in front of people. And I even think you announced NYLON Guys coming back to print on the People Brands Things Instagram, which for those who don't know is kind of like a news aggregation account, which I thought was kind of an interesting move even for like announcing this? Obviously, it's more like B2B type
Yeah.
news, but what was the reason behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in terms of, especially with our audience. Our audience is not really going to be on like AP News or the Newswire.
What?
Maybe they are. They're
Yeah,
great
no,
readers. But so even if you do one of those stories, you're kind of like, okay, great. When are you guys posting it to your Instagram?
Yeah.
And with People, Brands, and Things, it was cutting. It's straight to the Instagram, which is really exciting. And we really liked working with them because they seem to really care about the process of it. And it could have been an easy like, this is happening and wash our hands. They really, they asked for like my camera roll of shooting with Somber and things like that. And it just is a way of, you're gonna put it on Instagram eventually. So that was it felt like in terms of what the Nylon Guy reader would be getting news from would be from that channel.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I was wondering, as our final question,
Yes.
if we could get some It Girl recommendations.
Oh my God, yes.
From you, maybe just a couple of
Okay.
recommendations, 3 things.
3 things. Okay.
Yeah.
This is top of mind because I'm going to see them tonight. There's a band called Florence Road
Oh.
that I'm very into. They're Irish. They're playing at Baby's All Right tonight. I'm very excited to go see that. Oh gosh, another It Girl recommendation. What am I really? Okay, Poshmark, guys. I know it's not new, but I get all of my clothes on Poshmark, and I really love
This top included.
This top included.
Okay.
These Chanel flats, $200 on Poshmark.
Oh, amazing.
So
Okay.
cute.
Great. And a third It Girl recommendation. Nylon, no. I'm trying to think what I'm. Ace Pizza in Williamsburg. So I went on the way to the subway
yes.
today, and I was like, I really want that for dinner tonight.
Oh, it's so good. I love ACs.
Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
Thank
guys so
you.
much for having me. This was so fun.